that hymn we just sang actually is from the 4th century. It was written by an early saint. He was Bishop of Milan named Ambrose. He actually was the one that converted St. Augustine. So we've been talking about light as central to our faith for a long time. And hear these words from John's Gospel, chapter 1, beginning at the first verse. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. The Word was in the beginning with God. All things came into being through the Word, and without the Word, not one thing came into being. What has come into being in him is life, and the life was the light of all people. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness cannot comprehend it. He, the true light, which enlightens everyone, was coming into the world. And the one who spoke those words, John later records in chapter 8, him saying, Jesus again spoke to them, saying, I am the light of the world. Whoever follows me will never walk in darkness, but will have the light of life. Shall we join in the prayer of illumination? Jesus, your light shines within us and our world. Let not the darkness shroud the light of your word. With you is the fountain of life, and in your light we see light. Amen. There's an old parlor game I've read about in which you put people in a room and have them try to describe everything in the room. And often they come out with a list that's, the carpet, the chair, the sofa, the end table, the flowers, going through all the things in the room. And almost inevitably, they leave one thing out: the light that makes it possible for them to see all the other things in the room. It's easy to miss this idea of light. It's so familiar, we really stop thinking about it. It's so pervasive, we stop noticing it. In our hymns, in our scriptures, in prayers, we speak of a God who dwells in light, who's surrounded by light, who calls us to shine and give light to the world as he is the light of the world. Psalm 84 concludes with a praise of God, calling God a sun and a shield to God's people. Maybe we'd say both the sun and the umbrella, I don't know. Psalm 36 talks about God as the fountain of life, in whose light we see light. There's a kind of physics of light in that verse we'll come back to. And of course, what Charlotte read from Isaiah 60 about a promise of a time to come when we don't need the physical sun anymore, because our light will be the divine everlasting light that shines and does not set. It's an image that the book of Revelation at the end returns to. In the Transfiguration, Jesus shines like the sun. And of course, Jesus repeatedly says, I am the light of the world. Those who follow me will live in the light. And later in his first letter, John will write, this is the message you've heard from him, and I declare to you, God is light. Now, comparing God to the sun and sunlight stretches back a long way before those early Hebrew prophets and psalmists. 4,000 years ago in Egypt, Their high god Ra is also the word for sun. Stonehenge in England, or if you're in Ireland, Newgrange, are built even before the pyramids, and they're aligned with the sun because the sun was so critical to the cycles of planting and harvest and maintaining life. And the first Christians, as far as we know, really took seriously Jesus' description of himself as light and identification of him as the Son, S-U-N, of righteousness. Archaeologists who've excavated early 2nd century churches in Romania tell us that all those church buildings were designed so that worshipers faced east. And in many churches, even today, we're oriented more north-south, but many churches are oriented along an axis that's east-west, so that when people are sitting in the pew, they're looking to the east where the sun rises. And some early documents of the 2nd, 3rd century encouraged Christians when they prayed to face to the east where the sun rises, the same way Muslims today face toward Mecca. People, ancient and modern, have understood that sun and sunlight shape not just the rhythms of the season that they were tracking at Stonehenge or Newgrange. They are critical to our human biology. What does photosynthesis do? It converts sunlight into food and oxygen, energy and oxygen on which our lives literally depend. Our whole visual system relies on light for us to perceive our environment and to move around in it and perform the tasks, relate to others. We know that in animals, birds, sea turtles, they move by season and rhythm of their own lives directly using sunlight or light as a way to navigate. It's why sometimes in New York City there's a week or two where those tall skyscrapers are encouraged to turn their lights off, because in the flyways, as birds are migrating, they're drawn to the light of those buildings and it throws them off their route. It's also, the sunlight has something to do with our health. We can talk about seasonally adjusted depression for some of us in the winter who find when the sun isn't there anymore and sets so early and comes up so late, we get a little down about all that. But vitamin D in our bodies, we require the sunlight naturally to produce that for us. Unless you're like me and slather myself with, sunscreen all the time. Because melatonin does a lot of things for us. It's when melatonin rises in our body, makes us drowsy, prepares us for sleep. Some of us, you may take melatonin tablets at night. Melatonin is also one of the most powerful antioxidants in our bodies. It regulates a lot of things. And low levels of melatonin, vitamin D, low levels of vitamin D can relate to a lot of health issues. Every cell in our body has a receptor for vitamin D that we get from the sun. So despite all these ways our lives depend on the sun and sunlight, the irony is we can't really see sunlight. It's like the bulb in the locked room where people have to identify everything. Sunlight is not an object we can look at. We can only see objects that are illuminated by the light, not the light itself. Light is produced as a electromagnetic radiation, really. It emits photons, and those photons strike an object, and the object absorbs some of them and then reflects back into the world others. And what we see when I'm looking at the pew or I'm looking at the wreath in the window is where the light has bounced off of it and broken into the colors that I see or you see. That was Isaac Newton's genius with the prism. White light is a mixture of all the colors, but each of them has a little different wavelength and travels at a different speed. So in the prism, they get broken up so that you get, what is it? What's the acronym we all learned? Roy, G, Biv. You get the colors, but the light itself, you can't see it. It's clear, it's white. Thinking about it, it's easy to see why our ancient ancestors around the world identified the divine and holy with the sun, with light. Like light, God is an unseen energy at the heart of all things, constantly pulsing life into the world. As that psalm says, it's the fountain of life overflowing, creating light. We can't see God with our physical eye any more than we can see the light waves bouncing around in the room. But just like those beams of light, God is all around us. Our lives depend on that divine energy and light constantly flowing around us and between us and within us. And in the same way, that's what we're describing when we sing praises to a God whose love and care constantly is poured out on us. And I think in the same way, we can't really see the light itself until it bounces off of something and is reflected back, is mirrored back, is why Jesus constantly in the New Testament is telling his disciples to shine as reflections, to reflect back the divine light that's shined on us. As our lives reflect the light and life and love of Christ, that invisible divine life that's always there gets made clear where it can be seen, experienced. And so when we reflect the light that's shined on us, we bring food to the hungry, we care for widows and orphans, we visit the sick, we seek justice in an unjust world, we work for a peace that brings reconciliation. Our lives are a prism that refracts and reflects the life of an invisible God, making it visible to others in our world, making it a rainbow of colors by our good deeds. But what about the darkness? Is darkness the opposite of light? You know, there's a tendency in the church sometimes to create this, and in our culture, we use darkness as a metaphor for bad, which spills over into a lot of ways people get treated if they don't have really fair, light skin. It's created a duality of light, dark, good, bad. But, you know, the Bible is more nuanced than that. It keeps saying that even when the sun sets and darkness falls, God's light shines even in the darkness. That Charlotte read that passage from Psalm 139. Here's the testimony of faith. Darkness is not dark to God. The night is as bright as the day. That psalm reminds us that even in the darkest places, maybe especially in the darkest places that we find in ourselves and in our world, we're met there by a dimension of light that is bright. The darkness is not dark for God. The night is as bright as the day. Or as another psalm, Psalm 18 puts it, Lord, you make even my darkness bright. Barbara Brown Taylor wrote a book called Learning to Walk in the Dark. And she writes, resurrection is always announced in sanctuaries in the bright light of Easter morning with lilies and trumpets and streaming light through the windows. But, you know, the resurrection really didn't happen that way. It happened in tomb-like silence, out of sight in the darkness of the tomb. Think about it. New life, resurrected life, starts in the dark. Whether it's a seed in the ground or a baby in the womb, or Jesus in the tomb. New life starts in the dark. You ever notice in the Bible it always takes 3 days for things to happen? 3 days in darkness. Jonah is 3 days in the belly of the whale. Jesus spends 3 days in the tomb. Paul, whose sight is taken from him and walks in darkness, Acts says, for 3 days. From earliest times, ancient peoples who were acutely aware of the sky learned how long they had to wait, sometimes in the dark, before the sliver of the new moon appeared in the sky. If you look carefully, every month, for 3 days, 3 nights, really, there's a pause between when the old moon goes dark and the sliver of a new moon and its light, its reflected light of the sun, reappears. Sometimes we enter the darkness, too. I don't know anyone whose life is all sunshine and bright smiles. Mine certainly isn't. We all go down into the dark places of fear or pain or disappointment or betrayal or the loss of clarity about what we're going to do next. Maybe it's just when we turn the lights out and our bedrooms go dark. You know, in the dark, lying there, our busy minds can't have a lot to distract them. So a lot of things we worry about come flooding back. Lying there in the dark is where we come face to face with what really matters, because it's too dark for our usual ways of distracting ourselves. When it says in Psalm 18, Lord, you make my darkness bright, it's reminding us that sometimes the place where we meet God is in the darkness. It's that Leonard Cohen line. It's in the cracks that the light shines through. Not many of us are grateful for those moments of darkness that come upon our lives. In her book, Taylor writes, "I have learned things in the dark that I could never have learned in the light. Things that have saved my life over and over." Today, we began by giving thanks to God who dwells in light inaccessible, hid from our eyes, yet constantly pouring its energy, creation's energy, into us and our world. And our scriptures invite us to remember that the God we sing of in Holy, 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 another of those hymns, that God is hidden in darkness, where the glory is hard to see. So the invitation this week is to let the light shine in us so that others around us, whether they're in sunny or dark times, can see God's mercy, God's holiness, God's care. To let our light shine as a reflected light so that others may see it and their lives be transformed, as Jesus says in that passage in the Sermon on the Mount, paraphrased. May our lives be like prisms that break the invisible light into all those rainbow of colors so that the world is made more bright and more safe. Amen.